So you've decided it's time. You're going to get a little active. You're going to grab some friends. You're going to build a group. You're going to make a change. How do you get started? What are some of the stumbling blocks you could encounter along the way? Who are some of the people who could help? What are some of the things that you can look forward to? What are some of the potential struggles? Those questions and more answered by our next speaker. She is the co-founder and co-chair of AAPI in Gaming, an organization that grew from 0 to over 3,000 members in just the course of a year. She's also the founding designer on Meta's Horizon Worlds Metaverse social equity team, helping to design a number of tools to advocate for folks in marginalized positions. To tell the story of AAPI in gaming, please welcome to the stage, Siobhan Yu.
Hey, I'm Siobhan from AAPI in Gaming, and here's what we're all about. AAPI in Gaming is a community platform that amplifies the voices of the Asian American and Pacific Islander diaspora in the gaming industry. We work to increase visibility and promote cross-cultural appreciation, which ultimately leads to more games that reflect the diverse faces behind them.
We recently spoke at GDC discussing topics like highlighting AAPI game developers, authentic representation, and finding meaning within the toughest time of the industry. We also hosted the Bubble Tea and Taiyaki meetup at the Metreon to meet and connect with our community in person for the first time.
We offer lots of resources and support for our AAPI community by providing career counseling, resume reviews, mock interviews, and mentorship. We uplift AAPI developers through our Steam Curator page and our AAPI Game Directory, where we promote new games every month. We also host game jams, virtual events on Discord, live streams for AAPI industry professionals, and even more.
Want to stay updated and be a part of our amazing community? Follow us on social media with the handle AAPI in Gaming. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also join our Discord by clicking the link on our website, aapingaming.com. See you soon!
We've accomplished a lot in 1 year, from growing our social media numbers, hosting a GDC roundtable, partnering with local businesses, hosting events from gaming giants like MapleStory Worlds, and interviewing Pulitzer Prize-winning AAPI indie devs from 1000 Times Resist. We're entirely volunteer-run with 14 volunteers helping in whatever capacity they can. But how did we get here? This is the most common sentiment I hear when talking about AAPI and gaming to my peers. I wanted to do something similar, but I didn't know how to get started. I hope that by sharing this journey about my community, it'll make it a little easier for someone else to grow their own. First off, gotta do some research. Think about what works in your existing communities. Look at the organizations you're already part of and list down what you like about them. Write down what you would do differently and what you would want to do the same. While you're at it, reach out and see if there are potential collaboration opportunities to help you get off the ground. Asian Creative Network is a marriage of identity and discipline. I've gotten the most value out of this online community in the past, and it was a significant source of inspiration for AAPI and gaming. The Indie Game Academy hosts live, engaging workshops, and they're now our partners too. From subtle Asian traits, I learned the true importance of a meme channel and a food channel. Lighthearted fun is just as important to building community. I started a movie night series because of the Discord community of subtle Cantonese traits. Folks there passively hang out and voice to work, watch TV, and gossip. This is still an aspirational goal for our org. Look beyond just the gaming industry. For example, in academia, there's the best book ever, titled Made in Asian/America by Christopher and Tara, who spoke at last year's Game Devs of Color. You could watch their talk, I think, on the Game Devs of Color YouTube channel. I reached out to them for help with topics for our GDC roundtable. One of our staff is also a co-founder of Filipinos in Tech. We held a collaborative event with them for resume reviews because of our shared goals. Compare similar groups and find people who are key in the organization to reach out to them and ask them how they got started. For example, Black in Gaming and Latinx in Gaming are both 501c3 nonprofits, and they also started as special interest groups in the IGDA, also known as the International Game Developers Association. Latinx in Gaming later sponsored our enamel pins to give out at GDC. Compare your org to existing groups in the same space and identify gaps. Where is the most need? Project AWR, Asian Women Representation, Chinese in Gaming, and Asians in Gaming. These existing organizations inspired me to focus our efforts on the experiences of the AAPI diaspora specifically. I also noticed that the IGDA didn't already have an AAPI special interest group. Weigh the pros and cons of being grassroots versus being part of another organization. With AAPI and Gaming and the IGDA, there are a couple cons in the beginning. We took extra time to be approved. So in 2024, we weren't able to hold events for AAPI Heritage Month in May because we started in about the end of April. But the pros outweighed the cons eventually, as being part of the IGDA greatly improved our credibility, provided a funding opportunity, as well as expanding our reach. For example, MapleStory Worlds found us through the IGDA. We were also able to secure a GDC talk through them. The IGDA has also been great and flexible to work with. So how to get started? Remember that you are not alone. Avoid starting from scratch. Because our co-founder was in another gaming org, we were able to clone their Discord server configuration, which saved a lot of time. Heck, just ask, you can clone ours. Give opportunities to people in the community to help run the group. People are willing to help. People want opportunities to help the org and will be more invested in its growth if they're a part of it. If you try to do everything, you're depriving the community of the opportunity to grow as well. Mika mentored a promising student into becoming our community manager, despite them not having prior experience. Lastly, write down your values and what your org stands for, what your goals are, and what problems you're trying to solve and for whom. This helps to align other staff, interviewees, as well as folks new to the org. I wrote ours not too long ago and wish I'd done this earlier. For our public FAQ, I included these questions. If you're curious about the answers to any of these, you can find it on our website. And answering frequently asked questions up front sets clear expectations for everyone. Finding friends, not founders, because this is not a tech startup, we're a nonprofit. I was worried about finding co-founders as I don't have a lot of AAPI friends in game dev. Fortunately, we have the World Wide Web. Find at least one other person who is dedicated to organizing the group to keep you accountable. When I reached out to the IGDA to start the AAPI and gaming group, the admin from IGDA put me in contact with Mika, who had happened to reach out that same week. Here are the receipts. There's the email. Legendary lore here. Other ways could be through game jams and events like this one. So if you're looking to start a community or an indie game studio or a book club or whatever it is, I challenge you to post in the chat right now and hopefully we can make some connections. All right, social media, we all dread it, but how can we make it a little less bad? Because posting every day forever is not a real attainable goal. At least for me, it really is not. Make sure to meet people where they already are. This goes for both focusing on a social media platform and focusing your efforts around a particular time of year. A lot of members of our community are looking for work in the games industry or are students or just starting out. Because of this, LinkedIn has been our strongest platform, which makes sense because that's where folks are already spending their time job hunting. Instead of the daunting task of just post every day forever, we found that targeted specific campaigns worked better for us, such as during AAPI Heritage Month, Lunar New Year, and Filipino American Heritage Month, when folks are already thinking about their AAPI identity. By highlighting people in the industry, it opens up partnerships as well. This voice actor we promoted reached out to thank us, building goodwill for future collaborations to come. Shout out to Kimmy, our social media manager, for doing a killer job on our socials thus far. All right, events. We all need something to look forward to, especially in this day and age. Avoid not having any events lined up. It's just bad. Prospective members may gauge the health and activity of a server based on what events you have lined up. This also goes for a website. Integrating a plugin that automatically syncs your social media posts lets people know your org is alive and kicking, even when you don't have time to manually update the website. We've put on all kinds of events, from interviews, in-person meetups, game jams, let's plays, movie nights, and even virtual dance parties. For interviews, interview people of interest to your community. to solicit them, just email them directly. Very few people put in the effort to contact them, and the interviews are often excited to promote their own work. Remember to ask how this partnership can most benefit them. For my interview with Deb, she wanted to promote t-shirts containing dialogue she'd written for the game, so we worked it naturally into the script. Also, remember to be open to different formats. For example, a scripted or pre-recorded interview is fine if that suits the interviewee better. You can just have a premiere on YouTube instead. For in-person meetups, just approach the local business and ask the manager. Businesses love any opportunity to have more customers. Thank you to Abby for our head of partnerships here. This is a photo of our meetup at Share Tea and Uji Time at GDC with the special AAPI and gaming exclusive drink. And we had over 100 folks come by. To push these events even further, look for ways to partner with organizations and the people you want to champion. We had a Filipino-American indie dev with a game centered around Filipino culture that we wanted to promote, which made for a good opportunity for an up-and-coming streamer to host a live Let's Play. We then utilized the IGDA Twitch channel for twice the amount of reach of her personal channel. That's all I have today, and if you have any questions or you want to partner on something, please feel free to reach out to me personally or to the team. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for that talk, Siobhan. I think oftentimes when we start a project or a group, we feel like we have to change the world alone. But being able to partner with other organizations, with other interested communities, it allows you to amplify that power. The whole is more than the sum of its parts. And if AAPI and gaming's story is representative, then there's a lot of power to be gained by working together. You can learn more about AAPI and gaming by looking up AAPI and gaming on Instagram or Blue Sky. You can also learn more about Siobhan on LinkedIn or Blue Sky at Siobhan U.